Mission Atlantic, to ensure a sustainable future for the Atlantic Ocean. Integrated Ecosystem Assessment, or IEA, is a holistic approach to managing ecosystems by evaluating the cumulative impacts of natural variation and human activities. It follows an IEA loop that starts with scoping the system, together with stakeholders developing indicators, analysing the risks from and to different parts of the system, testing potential future scenarios under natural and anthropogenic change, and refine focuses on revising and improving the assessments based on the outcomes and insights gained from earlier stages in the cycle. This process helps balance trade-offs between ecological health, social well-being, and economic viability, ensuring sustainable use and conservation of ecosystem services. Scenario testing tracks the hypothetical implementation of management strategies under environmental change and their effects on the ecosystem. Meanwhile, the continuous monitoring of key indicators to assess progress towards objectives allows for adjustments in strategies based on real-time information and changing conditions. In this video, we investigate challenges and opportunities for ensuring policymakers have access to the latest and most relevant scientifically derived knowledge. Our guide, Pernille, lays out a series of risks related to the management of ocean resources, which natural scientists should consider when trying to communicate their findings, before providing some concepts that can alleviate these risks. The complexity of real-world science policy landscapes is illustrated, and Pernille makes the case for more scientifically literate generalists to bridge the gap, not only at the science policy interface, but across scientific disciplines as well.
Hi, my name is Pernille. I'm a senior researcher at Maritime University in Malmö, Sweden. I have been also a member of the Danish Parliament and a member of the Nordic Council. I am going to present to you today the results of a study we have conducted as a part of the Mission Atlantic project. When looking at the ocean's ecosystems, we need to understand and prioritize holistic frameworks such as the IEA. An IEA is a relatively new ecosystem management tool, and therefore there's a need for more knowledge on how policymakers and scientists understand and prioritize the integrated ecosystem approach and the process. We have examined discourses surrounding ocean science diplomacy and its role in IEAs internationally from the perspective of different experts such as marine scientists, policy decision makers, policy advisors, civil servants, both in the global south and the global north. And we have conducted qualitative study with semi-structured interviews, in-depth questions. We found that when answering sophisticated research questions, considering, for instance, governance for supporting ocean sustainability, we need input from across disciplines. Natural science questions cannot be totally isolated from the broader perspective of management, governance, and human concerns. One of the most frequently mentioned risks was the lack of communication focus, and also most participants mentioned that communication and communicating to non-scientific audiences requires specific training and skills that most natural scientists do not have. It was mentioned in our study that natural scientists, or most natural scientists, are in their own bubble, and that scientific knowledge is not shared and communicated beyond one's own academic circles. And this also complies with a substantial body of literature that identifies communication as one of the key skills for successful evidence-based policymaking and for closing the gap between science and policy. As I've just mentioned, one of the big risks of implementing ocean science diplomacy in an IEA is the challenge of adopting a holistic approach, which requires new approaches such as social science methods. And participants in our study have highlighted that in relation to this, there are huge capacity challenges. Having the right people with the right skills is an obstacle, but also getting funding for the whole IEA process is an obstacle. Including human aspects is a problem, and so more capacity building is needed, especially in the global south. The science policy disconnect can arise when there's no political will to follow the scientific research, when scientists are biased and defend their own national interests because of power struggles, when consensus cannot be reached within the scientific community. It was also mentioned that there were lobbying and pressure from sectors such as oil and gas. Corruption was mentioned, especially these last issues were mentioned with experts from the global south. As you can see in this figure, we have identified 5 risks, and now I would like to discuss enablers. We have identified 3 overall enablers, which will be presented now. One of the interesting questions that has come out of this study is how we can enable conditions that can improve knowledge exchange and policy impact when doing an IEA. There's a growing awareness of the importance of incorporating diverse knowledge systems to address complex environmental challenges and such as climate change and biodiversity loss and biodiversity conservation as a whole. Despite this recognition, there are still barriers that prevent science from entering the decision and policymaking processes. As an example, we see in the picture, which is from a COP. In the COP, scientists and decision makers still organize separate fora on, for instance, biodiversity knowledge. So based on this study, I will claim that we need to rethink policy impact in this context of ecosystem management and science. Notions of impact and engagement and knowledge exchange are still typically premised on simplistic linear models of the policy process, which is completely wrong. Policymakers are not just keen to utilize expertise that are produced in policy briefs, and if anyone doubts this, that you can only look at the huge amount of policy briefs that are produced all over the world. There's a lack of a common language between science and policy and diplomacy, which was also identified as a risk in our study, and that can hinder communication and collaboration between scientists and diplomats and policymakers. We need to design science policy interfaces that are more optimal, and here you can see that there's 3 different parts of the science policy interfaces that we need to consider when designing optimal models of this. In this figure, we can see that the policy environment is very complex. There's a lot of different actors in the environment, and we need, in science, we need more knowledge of the complexity, which is definitely not a linear process going from policy briefs from scientists to making changes in the political decision-making environment. Scientific knowledge needs to be communicated and shared beyond one's own circles. That requires more scientists that are qualified to communicate scientific data to multiple stakeholders. This is very crucial and very important in order to close the gap there is between the two very different communities of scientists and policy makers, decision makers. There's a lack of recognition for social science and social scientists in climate change literature, which is also reflected in the IPCC reports. For the first time since the IPCC was founded more than 30 years ago, the report from 2022 included a chapter devoted to the social aspect of climate mitigation, the general importance of integrating interpretative social sciences into climate and ocean research has been raised by a number of scholars. We also suggest research on methodological reservations and tendencies in the natural sciences to value quantitative approaches over qualitative approaches. Studying human behavior is crucial to be able to change the behavior of humans, which is the huge next step for climate change. We suggest that more social scientists and communication specialists are included and embedded in research teams and in research institutions. Thank you for listening. These were just some of the results and the points that I had time to make for today. I hope that researchers will adapt new communication and engagement models in the future and engage with more stakeholders. And yes, thank you. Thank you for listening.